Austin Johnson is the director of the Campaign for Southern Equalities Research and Policy Centre and associate professor and chair of sociology at Kenyon College. And he joins me now from Gambia in Ohio. Appreciate you being with us.
Thank you for having me.
So what are the main concerns for the LGBTQ community as President-elect Donald Trump prepares to lead the country for a second time?
Wow, I think there's a lot of concerns. I think one of the primary concerns is for the trans community. In 2024 alone, over 600 anti-trans bills were introduced in state legislatures across the U.S. And in the last election cycle alone, around $215 million were spent on anti-trans election ads. And so we see a lot of energy and political hostility targeting this community, and the community's feeling it. As a social scientist, I see study after study that shows the negative impact of just the political advertisements and the political rhetoric, not to mention the laws when they do go into effect. And so I think there's a lot of anticipatory anxiety among LGBTQ people right now, and among trans people in particular, that their rights are going to be taken away, that it's going to be harder for them to access health care, harder to get an education, harder to provide for their families, harder to access community and to thrive in their lives. I think those fears are not unfounded. And unfortunately, the Trump administration has made clear that they're going to double down on them.
And why do you think it is that that Donald Trump and, of course, other Republicans decided to double down on transgender Americans?
Oh, I think this is a political strategy, using fear as a political tactic to distract people from real issues that they care about, like healthcare, like employment, like climate change, or gun violence in our schools. If you talk to most parents, and I'm an educator of college students, and so I see parents of college students, and I see college students now after they come out of high school. When you talk to these folks, they're not so much worried about culture wars. They're worried about everyday issues. They're worried about how they're going to provide for their families, what kind of jobs they're going to get after college. They're not worried about the issue of a trans student using the restroom in their school. They're not scared of their peers. They're scared of the outcomes in social life. And so I think that folks are using a fear of the unknown to distract people from the real issues that they don't have answers for, instead of offering solutions to the real problems faced by Americans and the real fears that people have about their future and their present. Politicians are marginalizing people who are already oppressed, targeting a population that makes up less than 1% of the American public, using vast amounts of resources to stoke fear and division rather than answering the question of what they're going to do for you and your family in the coming terms. And so I think it's a cynical strategy to distract and divide.
And transgender Americans are worried about Donald Trump's promise to, in his words, keep men out of women's sports. But many American women feel strongly about protecting their right to compete against other women who were born female. What do you say to those female athletes who have fought hard to compete and then find themselves up against individuals who were not born female?
I say that athletes, I respect the hard work that all athletes put into their sport, and how hard they train. Some of my students are athletes, and I see them up before I'm up in the morning down at the gym getting ready, and that's true for my cisgender athletes, and that's true for my transgender athletes. I think every athlete who commits themselves to a sport really gives themselves to that sport, and they try really hard and they work really hard at their craft. And to say that some students get the opportunity to participate in those and some do not, is a conversation that really goes against our values as Americans. And I hear the conversation around fairness and how people are putting cisgender women against transgender women or girls in these conversations. But I think that that's misguided, and it is using the stereotype of transgender women and transgender girls as scary and dangerous, whether they're trying to use the restroom, whether they're trying to play a sport, whether they're trying to access healthcare, or just live in their communities, these same tropes around trans girls and trans women being dangerous to other people come up time and again. And I think it's important that we question those tropes when they come up instead of taking them at face value. And so I push back on that. I think there's room for all kinds of women in sports. And I think that we should open those doors and make room for them and support them.
Austin Johnson, thank you so much for joining us. Appreciate it.
Thank you so much. Thanks for having me.